DND number 11, Circle of Life, in Jesus' Name, Part 3, Chapter 24. It's November 15th, 7 p.m., Friday evening, at the Grill, Los Angeles, California. The guys all held up their glasses as young Eric proposed a toast to the groom. To Alec, who stayed strong, who held on, who protected his girl against all odds. May you be blessed in your marriage as a husband and as a father. To Alec, the men all repeated before they drank. Alec looked around at the men who were present. He was astonished at this group who were toasting him. Just a few weeks ago, he was living in a tent in the woods behind a gas station and literally begging people to hire him to work for a day, for a meal for his girl, for anything. Now, he was about to be married in a church. He had transportation and a home to move into and a job, a real job, working at a law firm where he would one day apprentice. He didn't even understand how he deserved so many amazing blessings. Alec's emotions welled up. He glanced at young Eric and at Mr. Keno. They were God's warriors for sure. All of them were really just like Grandmaster Keno was always saying. Even Destiny's own father, who a few short weeks ago might have been glad to hear that Alec was dead, was now sitting here with this group of men. They'd worked a miracle there, and Alec was filled with gratitude and something else. He suddenly had a burning desire to be like these men, to have the ability to work a miracle in someone's life, a lasting miracle. Not for his own glory, but to do God's work. Wow. He realized he'd become a believer, and it was a beautiful thing. Ricky Keno raised his glass of Perrier, and everyone quieted to hear his toast. I want to toast a new member of our group, Dustin Copeland. I know Alec is glad that you're here tonight, and I want to say that the rest of us are also extremely glad that you're here with us. To Dustin, he ended. Hear, hear, they cheered. Dustin stood, and everyone quieted again. Well, I want to publicly thank Alec for staying strong and not giving up on life or on my daughter. I want to publicly apologize for how hard I made it for the two of you, and I want to publicly thank you, Ricky and Eric Keno, for finding Alec and Desi, for taking them in, and for turning everything around. I am humbled and grateful, and here's to the three of you. May God bless you all. Amen, they all said, and some clapped Dustin on the back. Gabe watched the interaction and smiled. His heart was full to see someone who'd somehow slipped away from God's presence find his way back. It was beautiful. He thought of that scripture about the shepherd leaving the 99 sheep to search for the one. When he found the lost sheep, he carried it back home on his shoulders, and everyone rejoiced. The reality of that scenario was much more impactful than the scripture suggests. Gabe looked down when his phone started buzzing and didn't stop. He pulled it up in front of his face and scrolled. Logan, Gabe said. Logan looked over, eyebrows raised. Yeah? You and Melody? You guys are like trending. Huh? Taylor posted a video of you and Melody singing that song, and it's gone viral. Really? He thought a moment. I wonder how Melody is going to feel about that. Well, she knows that Taylor posted it because Taylor asked her permission, so she can't be angry about it. Well, I don't think she'll be upset about it going viral. I think she'll be hurt by mean comments. Gabe scrolled for a minute. Well, if there are any mean comments, they're few and far between because everything I'm reading is positive. He scrolled a little more. Oh, well, that one isn't very kind. What's it say? Gabe shook his head. You don't want to know. Just tell me now, you already have my curiosity up. Okay, it says, that girl is the Keno's maid. He's just slumming it with the help. Logan shook his head and sighed. Maybe she'll be smart enough to not read the comments. Well, you weren't, Gabe said, making the others chuckle. New scene. Go! Go, Phil, go! Yes! Melody screamed as her brother broke free, put on the gas, and ran over 60 yards for a touchdown. They were behind by 2 scores, but Phil's score just got them closer. She turned to high-five and hug her parents and younger brother. They were all jumping up and down and screaming. Her father let loose a long whistle. People sitting around them were hitting her father and brother on the back. She heard, "That boy is fast," and "Man, oh man, he's got a future." She smiled. Her brother was good, but he was quiet and humble. He never really said anything about himself. Why was she just now realizing it? It's like being around Logan and the Kenos and watching their interactions with each other was opening her eyes to her own family. She looked over at her little brother, Lyle. He was chatting excitedly with her dad and laughing and feeling happy for his older brother's accomplishments. Very cool. She decided she was going to be a better sister. She'd always had her mind on her own troubles. What was she going to do with her life, focusing on herself and on her jobs? She'd mostly worked in the food industry, which she hated, but it was the easiest job to find. She'd started at the ice cream place at the mall when she'd been a sophomore, then went to fast food as a junior, then changed during her senior year to a restaurant, then changed this past summer to a high-end restaurant. She worked hard. She'd bought an old used car and paid for it by herself, paid for her own gas and insurance, and then started saving up for school. Only she wasn't sure if she wanted to go to the college route and go into debt with student loans. So many people she'd met at work had some useless degree and still worked as a server in a restaurant. She didn't know what the solution was, but she did know that she was blessed to now be working for the Kenos. Her parents wanted her to go to college, but that just because they thought it was the most accepted thing to do, and Melody knew it would make them feel proud that their daughter was in college, studying to be something impressive. But she just couldn't bring herself to go that route, not when she had no idea what she wanted to do with her life. Though after working with the Keno children, she was beginning to think that doing something with children is where her heart lies. Earth to Melly. Melody looked over at her mom with a smile. Carol Keith was a slim woman with brown hair that came to her shoulders and brown eyes and a kind smile. "You in deep thought?" her mother asked. Melody shook her head. Just thinking about Phil and how good he is, and I wish I'd been able to see more of his games." "Well, there's always next year, Mel," Lyle said. She smiled and nodded. "Will you be playing B team or varsity next year?" "Probably varsity," he said, "because Jaden is graduating and I think I have a chance at QB." "Fingers crossed," Melody said with a smile. Lyle smiled. "Thanks, sis. It'll be cool to play with Phil for his senior year." "Hey, Lyle, get down here." Lyle waved at a group of boys from his freshman team, then turned and looked at his dad. "Go ahead, but don't leave the stadium." Lyle headed down to sit with his teammates. "Hey, Melody," her father said, "it's almost halftime. What do you think about running down to the concession before it gets filled and getting your old man a hot dog and some of those chili fries?" "Ew, Dad, really?" He grinned. "It's not a football game without some greasy junk food." He handed her a 20 and she rose. "Mom, you want anything?" "Just get me a bottle of water." She nodded. "Be right back." It was the last game of the season and the place was packed, and she had several people ahead of her in line, and she tried to decide if she wanted anything. Nothing sounded appealing, though. Or maybe a candy bar. "Well, well, well, look what we have here." It took her a minute to recognize the voice and the fact that he was speaking to her. Before she realized what was happening, his hand closed around her wrist and jerked her out of line and pulled her over to the side of the concession building. "Cade, what are you doing? Let go of me." He laughed and let go of her wrist after he shoved her against the brick wall. "Imagine how I felt to be here at my old alma mater to watch a game and find my girl here. How lucky is that?" "I'm not your girl, and you're not lucky at all." She started to leave, but he grabbed her arm and shoved her back to the wall. "What do you think you're doing?" "Oh, come on now, Melody. Tell me you haven't missed all the fun times we used to have." The alcohol on his breath was strong, and she shook her head at him. "I haven't missed you at all, Cade. Not 1 minute." His eyes narrowed. "That's not very nice for you to say about your boyfriend." "Ex-boyfriend." "Ex. You broke up with me, remember?" "You keep saying that." "Look, I know you must be upset about that. You can't really blame me. I was leaving for college. You were about to be a senior in high school, and you'd already told me that you didn't want to take our relationship any further. So, really, it was you who ended it. All you had to do to keep things going was give a little." She swallowed hard. You mean give everything. He smiled. I was your boyfriend for 2 years. I'd been patient. Give me a break, Cade. We're done. Done. I have no feelings for you whatsoever. I've moved on. I advise you do the same. She started to walk away, but he grabbed her arm again and shoved her against the wall. This time, though, he moved close and grabbed her face with one hand, squeezing her cheeks hard to hold her still, and he put his mouth on hers. She squealed and struggled and pummeled him with her fist until he let her go. He finally let go of her cheeks but kept her pinned to the wall with his body. She looked up at him with tears welling in her eyes. I'm here with my parents, Cade, and my father's going to come looking for me if I don't get back soon with his food. Her voice was shaking with the fear that she felt, and she was frustrated that she couldn't control it. I'm not scared of your father. As a matter of fact, I could take your father out with one solid punch. She gasped. What is wrong with you? You used to be a nice guy. You've changed. You're talking about assaulting my father? Have you lost your mind? He smiled. Maybe it's because you make me crazy. I've done nothing to you, Cade. Nothing. Yep, and that's the problem. Stop this. Where's your boyfriend tonight? She swallowed. None of your business. Now let go, or I'm going to start screaming and make a scene and have you arrested. He laughed at her. She drew a deep breath and opened her mouth to scream, and he slapped his hand over her mouth. Okay, calm down. But Melody, we're not done, you and me. Not by a long shot. She didn't argue with him because she was afraid to. He stepped back and allowed her to leave, and she quickly got back in line at the concession stand, her entire body shaking. She watched to make sure he didn't come back at her, because if he came within 10 feet of her, she was going to start screaming and never stop. New scene. It's November 16th, 8 a.m., Saturday morning, Keith home, Huntington Beach, California. Melody stared into the mirror, trying to see if the makeup had covered the bruise on her cheek well enough to make it through the day. She'd been aghast when she looked in the mirror while brushing her teeth this morning and saw the blue thumbprint on her cheek. Very plain to see. It looked like she'd been able to cover it, but she'd have to touch up the makeup several times during the day. She heard the knock on the front door. Grabbing up her purse, she headed down the stairs of the split-level home. Her father beat her to the door. Hello, Logan. Good morning, sir, Logan said brightly. Well, don't you look fine this morning? Thank you, sir, he said, looking down at his black suit and blue tie. Mr. Keith stepped back. Come in, come in. Logan stepped into the house and glanced around, but stopped when he looked up a small flight of stairs and saw Melody. He smiled. She wore a white dress with bright blue flowers on it. The dress came modestly to her knee. Over top of the dress was a flimsy, see-through type jacket deal that was the same blue as the flowers on the dress, and the same length as the dress. She wore white heels and a bright smile. Wow, Melody, you look amazing, he said softly. Thanks, she said shyly. You do look pretty, her father said. Thanks, Dad. Hello, Carol Keith said as she came from the kitchen. Hi, Mrs. Keith, Logan said. It's nice to see you again. You too. You look so handsome in your suit. Thank you, ma'am. Melody came down to stand next to Logan, and Phil and Lyle came charging down the stairs behind her. Logan smiled at the guys. Hey, guys. Hey, Lyle said. Hey, Logan, Phil said. Logan nodded at Phil. I heard you had a great game. He grimaced. Except we lost. Yeah, I heard that too. Melody told you already, he asked. No, Jojo and I looked it up this morning. Jojo was interested in my game, Phil asked. Logan smiled. You're the brother of the girl I'm dating, and he's my brother, so he was interested. I told you it was a date, Lyle said quickly to his brother. One date doesn't mean they're dating, Phil replied. Logan smiled. Well, hopefully, if I do okay today, I'm going to see if she'll go out with me again. Okay, well, let's get going. You have to get set up, Melody said quickly. She moved forward and kissed her mother's cheek. Bye, Mom. Bye, Dad. She smiled at her brothers. Bye, guys. Logan shook hands with the boys and her father and mother and walked Melody out to his car. He smiled at her as he opened the car door for her. You really do look beautiful, Melody. Thank you. Logan looked up at the rumble of an engine and watched as the yellow Mustang drove slowly by her house. His eyes narrowed. Looks like your ex is stalking you. Melody looked over her shoulder and frowned. She couldn't suppress the shudder that shook her body for a few seconds, and Logan didn't miss the reaction. Melody? Are you okay? She smiled. I'm fine. So, how far is the church from here? It's about a 30-minute drive. He closed her door and went around and got in. I wonder if I can do anything to help since we're going to be there early. I bet they can find something for you to do if you want to help. Aunt Bree will be there, and so will Mrs. Copeland, and I'm sure they could use your help. I'd get you to help me, but I don't think you can lift the equipment. Probably not, 'cause we wouldn't want me to accidentally drop it down a flight of stairs, she said with a giggle. He laughed. No, we wouldn't. Been there, done that. New scene. Melody had been having a great deal of fun. It was fun to be one of the first people at the church to help with setting up everything. It was fun to watch the Kenos and Adams families work together without complaint to bring about this lovely wedding for two kids they'd pretty much adopted as their own. They laughed as they worked. Some of them sang as they worked. She, too, was working, helping set out flower arrangements or set up tables and chairs in the large reception hall, which also happened to be a gymnasium. When she had a chance, she went back into the gym to watch Logan and JoJo set up amps and speakers and lights and a drum set. JoJo gave a short demonstration of his skills on the drums, which totally thrilled Melody. He's good, isn't he? Logan said as he joined her for a minute. She nodded. There's something about a drummer, she said with a sigh. Logan's eyebrows rose. Well then, that's enough of that. He tried to usher her out of the gym. She giggled. There's something even more about a singer, one who can play so many instruments and write music and touch our souls. He stopped and smiled. Okay, you can stay. She laughed. Actually, I have to go back to the kitchen. I told your mom I'd supervise the people who are setting up the tablecloths. I have a checklist and all, so I have to go. Are the bride and groom here yet? I think they were just arriving when I came in here. Melody smiled at Logan's dad as he walked by, pushing a large dust mop. He nodded. Melody? He frowned. Logan, I believe you have things you need to do? Logan smiled. Yes, sir. He looked back at Melody. I guess we both need to get to work. She nodded and headed out. She'd been hard at work in the kitchen for at least an hour when Taylor came to find her. There you are, Melody. Hi, Taylor. You are wanted in the bride's room. Oh, is Miss Shelley here with the children? Taylor shook her head. Not yet, though she'll be here soon with Angelina. Oh, then who needs me? Taylor frowned. Melody, you know you're more than just someone who works for our grandparents. We see you as one of the family. Melody's face reddened. Okay, well, that's a really sweet thing to say. I said it because it's the truth. And the one asking for you we also see as a member of the family. Who is it? It's the bride. Oh, what does she need? Taylor stopped at the door and turned and looked at Melody. She doesn't need anything. She just wanted to see you. She smiled at her, opened the door, and went in. There she is, Jordan said. Melody smiled at everyone as she entered the room. Jordan sat in a chair, her hair being curled by someone Melody didn't know. Charity was standing behind Desi, who stood in front of a full-length mirror. They both turned to smile at and speak to Melody. Also in the room were the mother of the bride and Alex's mom, who both smiled at her and she nodded at them. They too were sitting in chairs having their hair styled. Oh, wow, Desi, Melody said. Your dress is beautiful. Hey, Melody, yeah, isn't it? Mrs. Keno helped me pick it out a few weeks ago. Mrs. Keno, Taylor's mom? Desi smiled. Yes, she's been so sweet to me. And don't you just look so pretty, Melody, Jordan said. I love your dress. Melody smiled. Thanks. I had to rush out and buy something, and I wasn't sure what to get. Well, you did good, Taylor said. So, Desi, Taylor said, you need to see me? Yes, I was wondering where you were. I mean, you're part of this group. I'm sorry I didn't ask you to be a bridesmaid, but when Mrs. Keno and I planned the wedding, I didn't know you. But since we spent the day together yesterday and you're one of the young ones like us, I wanted you to be here with me. Okay, well, that's very kind of you, Melody said. But don't worry, it's not like I felt left out. Yeah, how could you when you came here with one of the hottest guys in the nation, Charity said. She laughed at her mother's surprised look. Well, I mean, I'm the one left out. I don't have a hot date. And why are you looking at me like that, Mom? Have you seen Logan Adams? I actually don't know everyone yet, Marvinia Copeland said with a shrug. Charity, as you walk back up the aisle after the ceremony, you get to walk with another hot guy, Jordan said. Oh, yeah, with JoJo Adams. I did an internet search on him. He's Logan's brother, and he's a Heisman candidate, and will probably go pro, and from the pics online, he looks really adorable. Too bad he's so young, Taylor giggled. He's very mature for his age. He's always been the serious one. And he plays the drums, Melody added. They all looked at her. He gave a small demo once he got the drums set up in the reception room. He's, like, really good at it. Drummers are hot, Jordan said. Right? Melody agreed. The girls giggled. Melody, step over here a minute. I want to tell you something privately, Desi said. The two girls went over near the entrance to a bathroom. Desi smiled at Melody and looked into her eyes. I really wanted you in here because you and I are alike. Melody's brows furrowed. What do you mean? The Kenos found you working in a restaurant. They found me at a gas station. Yes, I was homeless and you were just working, but still, these amazing, kind, wonderful people chose us. They chose to help us. They decided they were going to change our lives. And we are so lucky. I mean, you told me yesterday that you were in a place working a job you hate, not knowing what path to take in your life. You said you felt lost, right? Melody nodded. Right. I mean, I have a home and a family, but I felt alienated from them. My parents try hard to provide for us, but things have always been tight. I wouldn't have a car to drive if I hadn't been working since I was 16. I felt like life had nothing to offer, and my parents were pushing me to go to college, and I didn't want to go into debt for like $40,000 to get a degree when I didn't even know what to pursue. I worked with a lot of people who had their degree and couldn't find a job, and they were servers or cooks in a restaurant just like me. And they were in debt up to their eyeballs. So, yeah, I felt lost, and Miss Shelley has given me a completely new outlook on life and also helped me to renew my faith. I feel like a new person. Yep, that's exactly how I feel. I'm so grateful. I mean, it's Miss Shelley's daughter who has taken me under her wing, and she's made me feel like a new person, and I'm not even talking about the financial help. It's like I see everything differently. I even love my mother and father and sister differently. I mean, like, more than I ever used to. I appreciate everything so much more. Mrs. Keno says that's not because of her, but because of what I've been through. But I'm telling you, it's because of her. Her and God. She's helped me to see my faith in a whole new light. Really, not just her, the whole family. And Jordan, too. She's so awesome. Melody smiled. She is. And she's so in love with Eric. Desi nodded. They are so cute together. So what about you and Logan? What about it? I mean, it's only our first date. You don't have any feelings for him at all? Melody smiled. Well, he's really sweet. I think about him a lot, even when he's not around. Even before he asked me out. He actually asked me to watch Taylor's homecoming parade with him, and I did, but I had to go right home. And whenever the family's doing stuff together, he always sits by me. I'm not sure what that means. It means he likes you, silly. How could he? He barely even knows me. Desi shrugged. Well, I barely know you, and I really like you. Or like Taylor says, I just love you already. Melody giggled. That Taylor. I just love her too. Such a good person. I agree, she sighed. So, I'm just saying, me and you, we are both blessed to be chosen by the Keno family, and I've been told that once that happens, we are theirs for life. So you and me, we are special, and I wanted you to know that, and I wanted you to be a part of my very special day. Melody smiled and her eyes filled. Thank you, Desi. I think you and I are going to be great friends. Desi grinned. I think so, too. She frowned. You've got some dirt or something right here. She reached up and touched Melody's cheek. Melody gasped and covered her cheek. Oh, yeah, I was moving tables. I'll go clean that. She turned and hurried into the bathroom. New scene. There you are, Logan said as he approached Melody with a smile. I thought I'd lost you. Melody smiled. No such luck. I got called into the bride's dressing room and then got delayed with pictures. Well, I'm sure you stole the show. She rolled her eyes. Yeah. He moved right in front of her and took both her hands in his. I'm serious, Melody. You are beautiful. She blushed. Thank you. She looked up at him, standing so close. Were his shoulders always that big? He seemed very large right now. She looked up at him, his strong jaw, his straight nose, his blue eyes, his dark brown hair. He was so very good looking. A hottie, as Charity would say. He let go of one of her hands and reached up and took a lock of her hair between his thumb and forefinger. Your hair looks nice all down instead of up in your usual ponytail. You don't like my ponytail? He smiled. I love your ponytail. It's very cute. But this looks nice too. Your hair is so shiny and soft. She gave a short laugh as he tugged slightly on the lock of hair. Logan didn't laugh because he was mesmerized by her. Standing so close to her, he could see the different colors in her beautiful eyes. Some green, a tiny bit of blue, and some brown flecks, and a thin circle of black around the entire iris. He could smell her perfume or maybe shampoo or something. He leaned forward to sniff at her hair, and as he did, he had the thought, just a small shift, and he could kiss her. He drew a breath. It was too soon for that, or was it? The attraction was evident. His whole body felt drawn to her. He just wanted to get close. He looked from her eyes to her lips and back to her eyes and took another deep breath and stepped back. He cleared his throat. My mom just got here and brought us a little something to eat since we've been here for hours and the ceremony won't start until noon. He held up an insulated lunch bag. She drew a breath and nodded. That's very thoughtful of your mom. Where shall we go to eat? He looked around. I was thinking there's a little bench out under a tree on the side of the building. It's quiet there. What do you say? It sounds good. They made their way to the bench and sat down. Let's see what she packed, Logan said. He unzipped the bag and pulled out 2 cold bottles of cucumber pear juice, a container of grapes, a package of smoked cheeses and almonds, organic summer sausage, and finally 2 large organic chocolate bars. He smiled. What do you think? I think your mom is very sweet and thoughtful and cares a lot about your health. He nodded. Yep. He closed his eyes. Father, thank you for this food, and we ask your blessing upon it in Jesus' name. Amen, she said softly. He opened the package of cheeses and almonds and the summer sausage slices, popped an almond into his mouth and put the sausage in between 2 slices of cheese and handed it to her. She accepted and took a bite. This is really good. He made one for himself and put the whole thing in his mouth. Yes it is. It really hits the spot, or I'm just really hungry. Did you eat breakfast this morning, she asked. He nodded. Yes, right after our training. Training? Yeah, we train with my father every morning, except Sundays. We have a workout room downstairs. You'll have to come over one day and see. It's not a giant estate like the Grand's home, but it's nice. I'd like to do that. Cool. And you'll have to come to dinner one day. That's what my mom says, and I agree with her. I'd like that too. And of course, you remember my father said the same thing, so I guess once you get back from your Thanksgiving trip, we'll have to plan it. He smiled. Absolutely. They made short work of the food, with Logan eating the lion's share. He then opened one of the chocolate bars and handed it to her. He watched her closely as she broke off one of the squares and placed it in her mouth. She sighed. So good. Yeah, you can't go wrong with chocolate, Logan agreed. Are you going to eat yours? He shook his head. Not now. I'll just have a piece of yours and save the other for later. She broke off a piece and he opened his mouth and she placed it on his tongue and he chewed and smiled. Thanks. She watched his mouth and then swallowed hard and looked away. What in the world was she thinking? She thought of Cade and how she felt toward him when she'd first met him. He was cute and popular and very friendly. He really liked her and told her he was going to be her boyfriend almost immediately, and she saw no reason to disagree. They had a good time together, but she never watched him so intently as she did Logan. She never felt her stomach jump or her heart. Sorry, running out of battery. Gotta plug my phone in. She never felt her stomach jump or her heart race when he looked at her. But everything Logan did intrigued her. She watched him chew his chocolate and thought about that same mouth moving as he spoke, or even better, as he sung. She thought about the way his lips pressed together the other day as he spoke to Cade, the fierce expression in his eyes. It was very intimidating. Logan was a third-degree black belt and a student of Kino martial arts, and if he was anything like his cousin Eric, she was sure he would make short work of Cade. She thought about how frightened she was last night when Cade kissed her and held her against her will. They'd have essentially been in public, and he was that brazen. What would he do if he caught her alone? You okay? She blinked. Oh, yeah, my mind drifted off. He frowned. Am I that boring? Not boring at all, just thought-evoking. Well, we'd better get back inside. I have to sing. Oops. Well, we'd better get back inside. I have to sing before the processional, and I need to warm up a bit. She nodded. I'm looking forward to hearing you sing. I'm looking forward to singing for you. Melody glanced around as the church began to fill up. For it being a last-minute ceremony, there was an awful lot of people here, she thought. Probably mostly people who attended this church and knew Desi's family. And also there were a lot of young people, so Melody thought they were the people that went to high school with Alec and Desi. After all, she'd been a cheerleader and he was senior class president. They were probably pretty popular. Melody noted that several men in black suits with the Ameritech seal on the breast pockets ushered in and stood along the side walls of the church. Then there was a large murmuring of the congregation, and she looked back to see Mr. and Mrs. Kino walk in together. They stopped a few times to greet a few people. Melody knew once they sat down, the rest of the people milling around outside would come in and take their seats. She watched as Miss Shelley and Grandmaster Kino and 4 of their 5 children came in and took their seats. Then Mark and Bella Adams with their little Emily, and right behind them Joey and Breeze Adams with their Sophia, Kelston, and Ledger. Jeffy and Cam with their baby in a carrier, and Kimmy Lee with her husband Jensen walked down the aisle, and right behind them was Jason Lee and his wife, Angel. Melody turned back in time to see Logan rise, strap on a classical guitar, and move to the front. He strummed, bent down, and turned something on the amp, and strummed again, then faced the congregation. Melody thought he was about to sing, but instead, he took her breath away as he played an amazing and intricate guitar solo of From This Moment by Shania Twain. During the first part, people started coming in quickly and finding their seats, and by the time he finished the instrumental, everyone was sitting and gazing up at him reverently. He got to the last chord of the song and stepped closer to the microphone, then melted her heart as he began to sing the words to the song. She'd never realized it was such a beautiful song with beautiful words. From this moment, life has begun. From this moment, you are the one. Right beside you is where I belong. From this moment on. Melody got a notice on her phone and glanced down at it. It was from Gabe's website that he was live. She looked around but didn't see Gabe, but she noticed that Mrs. Kino, Brianna Adams, had her phone out and pointed at Logan. Melody smiled. Logan finished singing, and you could have heard a pin drop. She wanted to burst into wild applause, but she guessed it wouldn't be appropriate. He took off the guitar, and a woman seated herself at the piano, and the processional began. The pastor walked down the aisle and took his place at the front of the church. Melody smiled as Alec walked down the aisle next with his mother, Ivana Morgan, on his arm. He took her to her place on the front right side of the aisle and then took his place on the right side. Next, JoJo Adams had been recruited to escort Mrs. Copeland down the aisle, and as the bride's mother, seat her in the front pew of the church on the left. He then went to stand near Alec. Next, the groomsmen walked in. Gabe first, and then young Eric, as he was the best man. They were very handsome in their black suits, each with a bright blue tie, and Melody realized that Logan, too, wore the same color tie. She also realized that she matched them in her blue floral dress. Next, bridesmaids came down the aisle, Taylor and Jordan, wearing lovely gowns of soft pink. Their hair was down, Taylor's now almost to her waist, and Jordan's to the middle of her back. They were beautiful, and Melody could tell that everyone else thought so too, as there was a strong murmur when they started down the aisle. Jordan on her crutches and Taylor walking slowly in front of her. Behind Jordan, Charity, the maid of honor, and the bride's sister came down the aisle. Mrs. Keno had been able to procure a beautiful dress for her in the same color pink, though it wasn't quite the same style as Jordan's and Taylor's. Next, Melody held her breath to see if little Angelina Keno would be able to come down the aisle on her own. She saw Desi nod at Angelina and whispered to her. The beautiful child smiled and started down the aisle very carefully and precisely, spreading handfuls of pink rose petals on the floor as she went by. It took her a while, but she finally accomplished it. When Angelina took her seat with her mother, the music changed, and Pastor Frank asked everyone to stand. Melody looked Desi over as she started down the aisle with her arm linked with her father. It was such a miracle. Just a week ago, Desi had planned to have Mr. Keno escort her down the aisle, but this was so much better. Desi looked beautiful. Her white dress had an empire waist and had several layers of ruffles. Even though everyone knew Desi was pretty far along in her pregnancy, it was really hard to tell. Her silky blonde hair was stick straight. The hairstylist had it taken up on the sides and flowers spilling down the back. She wore no veil, but her sleek hair acted like a piece of satin cloth. Desi locked eyes with Alec. He smiled at her. She smiled in return. They got to the front, and Mr. Copeland smiled at Alec, shook his hand, and then placed Destiny's hand in Alec's. He kissed his daughter's cheek and went to sit next to his wife. Melody looked up at the sight. Alec looked very handsome standing there with young Eric next to him, then Gabe, and then Jojo. Desi was so beautiful as she turned to face Alec. She handed her bouquet to Charity behind her. Beside Charity were Jordan and then Taylor. Melody glanced up at Logan and found him looking at her. She smiled and he winked at her, making her heart jump and her face turn pink. Melody tried to listen to the ceremony, but every time she looked at Logan, he was looking at her. She looked up at him and he'd quickly look away. It was so distracting. Next thing she knew, Desi and Alec were saying their vows, which she barely heard, and exchanging their rings, and then the lady was at the piano again, and the wedding party exited the church and headed to the gymnasium turned reception hall. Logan was at her side in seconds. "Well, that was fun," he said. She smiled. "Logan, you were so awesome. I didn't realize you could play the guitar like that. And then when you sang, oh my goodness, it was so good. So good. I mean, you actually made me, like, lightheaded." He smiled and nodded his head. "That's good to know." "Why?" she asked. "Oh, it's always good to know how to make your date, lightheaded." He'd almost called her his girl. She felt like she was going to faint. "So I'm just waiting for the rest of the people to get out of the way, and then I need to carry the amp to the reception. Will you carry my guitar for me?" "Of course." They were swamped for a few minutes as people made their way toward him to tell him how good he was. He thanked people, took selfies with them, and even signed a few autographs. Melody smiled. "You do that so naturally, like you've been doing it your whole life." He shrugged. "Well, I'm new to this, but I've been around people who've had to do it their whole lives, and so I guess I learned. It still blows me away that someone wants an autograph or a picture. Pretty soon it won't surprise you at all. It'll be old hat." He chuckled. "I hope it never feels that way." They made their way into the reception hall where music was already playing and a DJ was handling the playlist. Logan got his amp plugged up and his guitar on a stand and went straight back to Melody. "Would you like something to eat or drink?" She shook her head. "No, I'm fine right now." Cheap date," he murmured. She giggled. The DJ announced Mr. and Mrs. Alec Morgan and called them to the floor to dance the first dance. Etta James, at last, sounded over the speakers, and everyone applauded the couple. And then the music changed, and Mr. Copeland was invited to dance with his daughter, and Mrs. Morgan to dance with her son, and the music changed again, and everyone was invited to dance. "Will you dance with me?" Logan asked. Melody nodded, and he took her hand and led her out to the dance floor. The music was slow, and he snaked his arm around her waist and pulled her close. She looked up into his eyes, and he smiled at her and then frowned. "What's this? I think you have some dirt on your face," he said. She looked down immediately. I'll go see about it in a minute. Just dance with me." "Okay." He held her tighter as he spun around with her in his arms and then slowed again. Melody kept her head down for the rest of the dance, and as soon as the song was over, she excused herself, grabbed her purse from their table, and headed to the restroom. He watched her go. Taylor and Gabe came up beside him. "Did you say something to upset her?" he asked. Logan shook his head. I don't think so, but she does seem a little jumpy." Gabe jiggled Taylor's hand. "You want to go check on her?" Taylor nodded. "Sure, I'll be right back." In the restroom, Melody stared into the mirror. The bruise was getting darker, but still, if she put enough makeup on it, she should be able to conceal it. She started dabbing the makeup on, but used too much, and it looked ridiculous, and she wet a paper towel and wiped her cheek clean so she could start over. "What happened to your face?" Taylor asked as she came up behind her. Melody practically jumped out of her shoes. "Good grief, you scared me," she scolded. "Sorry, I didn't mean to. I thought you heard me come in. So, what happened?" Melody swallowed. She looked into Taylor's eyes. I hit my face on the cabinet door in my bathroom." Taylor looked closely at her face and then at her hands, which were trembling, and she sighed. "Well, I have this great concealer." She opened her purse and pulled out a makeup bag. She worked on Melody's face for a few minutes and then stepped back with a smile. "There, you can't see a thing." Melody smiled. "Thanks, Taylor, really." "Yeah, you're welcome. But, Melody, I don't buy for a minute that you hit the cabinet door." Melody looked down. "Melody, if you're in trouble, if someone is hurting you, you can tell me, or Logan, or Grandma. There are so many people in this family that you can turn to." She nodded. "I know. But it's not like that, really. I swear it was a one-time thing." "When did it happen?" "Last night. And I'm not going to say anything else, so please don't ask me." Taylor sighed. "Okay, for now. But if you need or want to talk to someone, I might seem young, but I'm a good listener." Melody smiled. "I can totally see that." And that is the end of chapter 24.